Okay, we're going to call the meeting to order for February 4th, 2021, our Teams electronic meeting. Public input, as we know, has been moved to the end of the meeting where we'll answer the questions. Introduction of late items. CAO, do we have any late items? I'm sorry, CAO, I can't hear you.
How about now?
That's better.
All right, so it's better for you, but I have to really carefully listen because my headphones aren't working then.
Oh,
There are no late items to the agenda.
thank you. So the approval of the agenda, recommended resolution that the agenda for the regular meeting for February 4th, 2021 be approved. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll motion that.
I'll make it.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Opposed? Carried. Minutes of previous meeting. That the minutes from the regular council meeting held on January 19th, 2021 be adopted, and that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting held on January 26th, 2021 be adopted. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? Okay. Discussion, okay, opposed? Carried. Petition and delegations. We'd like to welcome Aggie, the unit chief for Station 131, North Island District, BC Ambulance Service, BCEHS, Nathaniel Portage. How do you pronounce your name? Oh, you have to unmute.
It's Nat
There we go.
Pottage.
Pottage, thank you. Community paramedic, Amanda Jorgensen, and our manager for the North Island. So please go ahead, Aggie.
Well, hello, as most of you know, my name's Aggie Pringle. I've been living in Sayward since 2005. Just recently, within the last year, became community paramedic in Sayward. Previously, the position was held by Pat Rush, and she did an excellent job. Just wanted to take a few minutes tonight to introduce the program to those of you who may not be aware of it, and what it's looking like going forward. It started in 2016. It's a province-wide program, community-based. Basically, each community decides what it's going to look like within their community. The primary drivers behind it being started were to stabilize paramedic staffing in rural and remote communities, and to bridge any service delivery gaps within the community. And that would look like anything that the nurse practitioners or the physicians need a hand with. We're here to step up and help with that. The idea behind it is to reduce 911 calls, reduce hospital visits, and keep people safe, happy, and healthy in their own homes for as long as we possibly can. There are 25 communities on the island that have community paramedics and 104 province-wide. And it started basically as based on the programs that were very, very successful in Nova Scotia, Manitoba, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. Started out with 9 prototype communities. Sayward was not one of those, but we did get a community paramedic shortly after with the rollout of all of the communities joining. We do a whole bunch of stuff, community outreach and promotion. You may have seen on my on Facebook and in the newsletter where I've been talking about things like most recently stroke awareness, seasonal depression, safety and isolation for people like that are by themselves, seniors living on their own, people with disabilities living on their own. I do provide an education program component as well. For instance, I taught hand washing to the little kids at school, and taught some basic first aid to the older kids at the school. I've held clinics here at the ambulance station. They've been kind of curtailed recently because of COVID, but when the restrictions are lifted a little bit, I hope to get started back onto those. I had a blood pressure clinic for those who wanted to do some blood pressure screening to see if that was a health concern for them. Blood glucose, which is kind of a diabetes education. And I also taught hands-only CPR. And these weren't very well attended, but primarily due to the COVID restrictions and social distancing and those types of things. But I will be redoing all of those in the near future when the restrictions have lifted, so that I can have a bigger group and do some more stuff and anything else that the community would like to learn about and to see me demonstrate. I also do home visits to clients that are referred to me by the nurse practitioner at the clinic or their physician, or a variety of services that the patient might have, like community health. Those kind of people will refer to me. And what I would do is go into the patient's home, make sure that they're safe, help them to manage their chronic condition, and help them to, if they've had a flare recently, help them to figure out why that happened. If they had to go to emergency lately, why did that happen? And what can we do in the future to prevent that kind of thing from happening for them? Basically, it's a very patient-centered experience when you go into the patient's home. You help them determine what their goals might be, and you help them reach their goals. And the goals are going to be different for everybody. Someone that might be getting their blood pressure under control. Somebody else that might be better control of their blood sugar if they're diabetic. Someone else might have dietary concerns, like they have too much salt in their diet, which is causing a problem for their congestive heart failure. Those kind of things are what I would go in and help with. And also offer support for the clinic here. For instance, if Tracy's having some kind of a meeting or a clinic where she needs extra hands, I'll go over and give her a hand with that. I think that's pretty much what I had to say, and I just wanted to open up the floor for questions.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Yeah,
Councillor
I've got,
Craig?
yeah.
Councillor Craig?
Aggie, I have actually 3 questions. When you go into people's homes, do you do things like change dressings or administer prescription medication?
Typically, no. The dressing changes, if they need to be done, are done by a trained wound care nurse. That's outside of my purview. That might be something that I'll be able to do in the future, but not at this time. If it's just basic first aid, like the person scraped their knee or something like that, that's still in my scope of practice. But if it's a surgical wound or a wound infection or something like that, that is within the wound care nurse's purview.
Awesome. I also have a question. When you're on a regular shift, sometimes ambulances get called out of service area in a rabbit chain kind of thing, and then they shift ambulances to cover the gap. When you do a regular shift and you're outside of the service area, do your appointments just get shifted to another day, or are you primarily Sayward centric, so you don't leave Sayward? I'm
Sayward centered as a community paramedic.
Awesome.
I stay in Sayward unless the ambulance crew is running separately for me. I have my separate vehicle. I run around and do my appointments in my vehicle separate from them. If the ambulance crew that's on gets called out to a serious call, then I might be called out to go back them up. But it would be rare where I'd be going to another community to cover off anything that's going on there.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Do we have any additional questions? I would like to say I'm glad that service is available here. I know how important that is, especially for seniors and people living alone, because they may not have access or transportation to be able to get them somewhere. And the convenience of having that at home, a professional coming in, I think is a godsend to the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, Pat set it really up really well for me in this community. And just going forward, I'm looking to expand on what she started. The program is changing all the time. We're doing more and more things, but the basics remain the same. Health promotion, home visits, community education, that kind of thing. But going forward, we're going to be able to do a lot more stuff.
Great. Councillor Polson?
Yeah, Aggie, I am lucky enough to be on the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District committee, and we're currently starting to look at the strategic plan for the next 5 years. And at the last meeting, we talked about some of the issues based on what the Island Health Plan was for Comox Strathcona area. And I just wonder if you have any areas where you see a lack of service available to us in Sayward right now that could be looked at it to be included in the strategic plan. And I'm thinking around mental health and seniors care, that sort of thing. I know we're a long way from the hospital. So when people call the ambulance and have to go there, I thought it was usually fairly needed. You know, it was an emergency that they were calling it for. But when there's issues in the community after someone has come home from being hospitalized for those sort of things, is there any areas that you can think of that might need additional care and support here? I know we don't have a physician here for one thing.
Right. Hopefully there'll be a physician coming back again, but if not, Tracy is an incredibly capable nurse practitioner for sure. One thing that I do see is when people do have to go to the hospital, that it's difficult for them to get transportation back afterwards. If, for instance, if they have to go into emergency for a minor procedure and then they're basically discharged, and if they don't have any family or friends nearby, there's a gap in transportation and in getting them home. Another one I'm seeing is home care, care aides to come in and assist the older patients and the patients with disabilities. I don't see a whole lot of that. Like, there is some agencies that do provide that, and I am able to provide a small part of that. But a care aide is a very specific skill set that I see a certain lack of here in Sayward. I think that's something that we could work on for sure. Mental health, we're seeing lots of improvement in that area, but there's still not a whole lot of locally available services. And part of that is because it's being patient-centered. The patients are not wanting to reach out and discuss mental health with someone who's local, with concerns of confidentiality and those kind of things. I do help a little bit with mental health with my clients, but I'm not trained specifically in that area. But if it's part of their overall picture, then I'll address it and help address it. But it's not a specific area of expertise for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I was also thinking about Tracy does an excellent job, but it's only for 4 days a week. And
Exactly.
So to me, I see that as a gap in our service, where being able to see a nurse practitioner or a doctor 7 days a week, or have access to on-call, would be beneficial for our community too, so that just because we're remote, we're still going to be getting relatively good service from the healthcare system. So
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to see that too. I'd love to see it 7 days a week as well. But we can't all be on call 7 days a week.
no, I know.
For sure.
thank
But
you for
yes, I would love to see that as well.
Aggie, did you want to introduce the other members of your team?
My apologies. Nat Pottage is our area director here for the Island North and my direct supervisor. And Amanda Jorgensen is my community paramedic mentor from Port McNeill.
Would you like to speak? Do you have anything to add, Nat?
I don't have anything to add. I think Aggie's put on a fantastic presentation.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you all for being here. We appreciate it and all the information. Now, if people just want to give you a call, they give you a call at what number, Aggie?
250-230-4501.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You
you.
have a wonderful night, and thank you everybody for attending.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aggie.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Okay, so recommended resolution that the presentation by BC Ambulance Service be received. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
discussion? Opposed? Carried. Correspondence on number 7. Recommended resolution that the correspondence from A to D be received. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll move that.
Thank you. Second? Second?
Second.
Thank you. Discussion? Opposed? Motion carried. Council reports. Can you just show by hand who has a report for council, from council, please? Oh, Councillor Craig.
Sure, I do actually. I'll just give a brief overview of what's happening with the EPC. The ESS, the SRD has organized 3 two-part sessions for volunteers to review and feedback on the ESS resources that the Literacy Center has developed. So basically the concern was in an emergency situation to be able to help people who have literacy issues. And so the SRD has put on a 3-part series to have the ESS volunteers tackle those issues and try to overcome them as best as they can. The next thing on my list here is the Fire Smart Economic Recovery Fund intake. That was on it was on January the 28th, if memory serves. And basically what that is, our fire chief will have more information than I do. He'll have a specific email directed to him, but the government is funneling some money into communities to develop the resiliency to wildfire protection. And that can mean anything from taking brush out or taking away problem trees or even training wildfire management teams. So that's kind of exciting. And what I find most exciting about that is that if we get enough fundage for this program, we could have jobs available for wildfire protection in our own community. So follow up with the fire chief on that one, but that's an exciting thing. On February the 9th, we've got a meeting for a few things: evacuation planning. 3 grant intakes are on the table. We have the Community Resiliency Grant, Investing in Canada Infrastructure, and an ESS grant. So we'll be discussing that on February 19th or February 9th. And I think we also have some tabletop exercises coming up too in that meeting for mock evacuations. So I'll keep you updated on what happened on February the 9th in our next meeting.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Craig. Councillor Kirchner, you said you had something last week you wanted to bring to this week?
Yes, but I'm not prepared tonight. Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Tinsley,
Nothing from me, Mr. Mayor.
Counselor Polson,
Nothing from me, sir.
thank you. Okay. So moving on to number 10. Maybe the CEO can remind me, because of all the information I have stuck in my little head here. Keys to 652. That would be what we're discussing here, correct?
Correct. Right.
Okay. So it's, from what I understand, everything is balls in motion to get the fobs and to have the security system put in and upgraded and all that other fun stuff. But it's, as was pointed out, it took 6 weeks to get the phones. So we'll wait and see what happens there. Now, is there anything else I'm missing there, CAO?
No, that's, well, I think, Mayor Baker, the idea of this item on the agenda was the discussion about providing key fobs to council for the mayor's office, and then setting the alarm system so that entry would be allowed to that end of the building, but not the entire building. And I think
Right.
that was the issue that you wanted to discuss tonight.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, as we talked about, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry, I thought I heard somebody in there. As we discussed before, what we're looking to do is putting an alarm pad over to the council mayor's office side. And this way, the CAO and the main administrative staff area would be continuously locked. Mayor and council would have access to the mayor and council office, the restrooms, and the council chamber. We're fortunate enough that a wonderful gift of a microwave showed up in the mayor council office today, which you can see right behind Councillor Kirschner there. So we're almost fully set and good to go and be independent on our own. So is there any discussion on that matter? No? Okay, thank you very much. So a recommended resolution is to go ahead, that the keys to the mayor and council office be provided as a member of council to order enhanced security in the administrative offices. So I need a motion, please.
I'll move that.
A second.
It's-
Councillor Paulson, thank you. Discussion? Opposed? Motion carried. Unfinished business is none, and I assume that it remains the same. Staff reports. Now, we missed the staff report on our last CAL, so that's going to be added in tonight. So staff report, we'll take it over to the CAO, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor Baker. This staff report was completed as a preliminary assessment and list of questions for the kinds of information we would want to obtain from the proponent for the zoning change. I initially had presented this list in sitting down with the applicant and going through the level of detail that we'd require. And I thought it might be useful for council to have a sense of the scope that we would be looking for to approve a development of this kind and of this size. Again, I mentioned in the beginning that it is a preliminary list of sort of an overview, partly because we know from talking with the applicant that the project is changing. In fact, I spoke with the applicant today and they do plan to come back to council with a bit of a presentation again, which is going to present to you the sort of proposed expanded scope of the project. However, this kind of is the sort of level of assessment and questioning that you should expect of staff to provide to you to make the decision for the rezoning. So it's really just an opportunity for you to look at that and to get a sense of the kind of information we're required to obtain in order to provide this kind of assessment. So I could go through it in detail, but essentially I've listed the kinds of recommendations at the end, which I understand from the applicant is underway now. Mr. Adama has hired a qualified environmental professional to complete the assessment for the riparian area protection regulations. And he's expecting his report on that. He's working on his traffic study. He's working with an archaeologist to complete the archaeological assessment with the representative from the Waiwaikum. That was a requirement or an expressed wish from that First Nation when the SRD did the initial consultation. So he's working through the requirements and recognizes that you know, he can come back and talk to myself or our staff or anybody here as he reaches certain little steps in the process that he needs more assistance on. The idea of the comprehensive development designation in the official community plan for this property is exactly that the applicant would work with the village to come up with a plan that's going to be full and comprehensive and beneficial to both parties. And so it is intended to be sort of a generative process where we work together, we identify our interests and they identify what they're wanting to do, and we try and work together to get something that works for everybody. So this is what that would look like. Now, again, we do know that the process is going to change quite a bit, or the project is changing because they're still in the process of refining it. When they initially applied in June, that was their idea, but now we're quite a few months down the road and they've had an opportunity to explore financing and other options. So yeah, and that's really what this staff report is for. And of course, you had the opportunity to hear the presentation last week, and so it would be helpful to me to hear from you as to what your expectations are going forward, and if you feel that there's more questions that you'd like to add to this. So thank you.
Councillors, anybody have a question? Councillor Tinsley?
Sorry, well, I think this is excellent, and it's as you said, CAO. It's a beginning to the process, and the only thing I wanted to add, I believe in some point, is it in this document that it talks about the taxes paid on this property or not paid?
It references through the mayor to Councillor Tinsley. The staff report references that what we do want is demonstration of a financial strategy. There has been some arrears, however, they're not out of sync with the policy, and that there's regular payments made so that the property is, you know, the owner has some extra costs with respect to extra interest payments and some penalties, but that there's a pattern there of paying these taxes on a regular basis over the years, for sure.
Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yeah, it appeared to me that they hadn't been paid in 2 years, but what you're saying is that they have been making payments towards that. Is that correct?
Well, what happened is and I understand that this is a pattern, that there's a bit of a delay, and then there's a payment made. So probably half of the amount owing has been paid now. And of course, that means that the applicant incurs extra costs, but they do make steady progress on an annual basis. And this seems to be a pattern in past years as well.
For the same owner?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Craig?
Yeah, a couple of things. The first one is, since the applicant's going to come back with a revised plan to council, I see your options on page 26 and 27. I don't feel that we should be making a decision today on either option number one or on option number two or option number three, because the plan is just going to be buried in the next few coming weeks. So I would agree with option number one, that we require further information for proceeding for the first and second reading, because the plans are going to change. Now, the second thing that I would like to ask, has the applicant given this village permission to discuss his tax situation with anybody?
Well, through the mayor to the chair, this isn't something that we discuss with people generally. It is public information if it's requested by the public. So You'll see that there's no information in the staff report on the taxes, other than the fact that we would like to see a financial strategy.
I see. So,
And with
so
respect to
the applicant
first-
has not given us.
Sorry, say again, Councillor Craig?
So just so I can clarify, the applicant didn't give us written permission or any other verbal permission to discuss this tax situation other than what's publicly available through a Freedom of Information request?
Well, that's correct. However, an applicant wouldn't necessarily have to go through the Freedom of Information to get the information. That is the backup if information isn't provided. But citizens are allowed to access that information. And as to the first question, there isn't a recommendation in this staff report, because it's correct that this isn't a decision-making moment for council. This is an opportunity for council to kind of review the material and become familiar with the nature of the analysis, so that when council makes its decision on this application, it has an opportunity to build that knowledge as you go.
Thank you.
From what I understand, anybody can walk into the office and ask to see the list on arrear taxes. It's not something that generally is provided by Freedom of Information Act. It's just public. Anybody in the public can access. So that's on that. So the staff report to be received, a resolution that staff continue to work with the developer to clarify and address further requirement. Sorry. Oh, I thought somebody spoke again. Information required for council to review the proposal once the final plan for the development has been resubmitted, and that the staff return to council for further direction once the applicant advises the plans have been finalized and issued the staff report addressed. So we're going to do this in two parts. So on that, do I have a motion, please? Can I get a motion, please?
Yeah, I'll move that.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second it.
discussion? Opposed? Carried. B, staff report is the Highlands Engineering from January 11th, 2021. Proposed to update the Village Sayward Master Drainage Plan. CAO?
Thank you, Chair Baker. You'll recall that in December, we had a rainfall event that led to a significant amount of water in the McMillan Road Drive area. Our Public Works foreman provided me with a copy of the Highland Drainage Report from 2000. And as I went through it, I realized that all of the recommendations were still quite relevant and yet had not been actually implemented, again, probably through lack of resources. But that we had still the same problem 21 years later. So I contacted Highland Engineering, who offered to come up, which they did almost the next day. And they did an assessment, and they've provided us now with this proposal to do what would be an update of that master drainage plan, and probably look at some of the same recommendations, but there might be some changes because the standards have changed in the sort of dimension of some of the couplings and the pipes because of the changes to the climate and the increased rainfall that have led to some of the engineering standards being insufficient for things like storm sewage and other things like that. So, and I wonder, I don't have in my package a copy of the proposal, but I'm hoping you do. Do you? Yes, good.
Yes.
So you'll see that what they plan to do is to spend 2 days in town and look at the existing data, provide an assessment that brings in the climate change projections and do some site assessments to look at the elevations, and then provide some recommendations for ongoing maintenance. You know, we do have some constraints. A lot of the open culverts that become problematic during these rainfall events get clogged up with grass and weeds and all sorts of things, which we're limited in our ability to clean out due to the riparian area protection regulations, which don't allow us to go in and scoop out material from any kind of channel that has the potential to bear fish. So that is what we work with, and that is maybe part of the reason why in some cases it makes sense to have a drainage system that's not open. Of course, that's more expensive. And then in other areas, it makes more sense to have it open so that the capacity is there for these changing events. So those are the sorts of things that we expect to see in this report, should council decide to proceed. The price is $16,690, which we would recommend to be appropriated from the general surplus funds to cover this work. And so that is the proposal from Highland Engineering for the update to the drainage plan.
Okay. So the recommended resolution is that Highlands Engineering be retained to update the master drainage plan as proposed on January 11th, 2021, and that $16,690 be appropriated from the general surplus funds to cover the cost of this work. And the future that the 2021-2025 financial plan be adjusted accordingly. And finally, that staff be directed to seek grant funding opportunities to cover this cost and cost carrying out the upgrades to the drainage system. So I need a motion, please.
So
I'll
moved.
move that.
Second,
I'll second it.
discussion. Councillor Paulson?
I have a question about the proposal that includes providing an assessment that factors in climate change projections to the year 2095. Is that a typo or is that the fact? Like that's 74 years away from now?
Through the mayor to Councillor Paulson, I think that is the new standard. You know, we've often used the 100-year flood projection. So, you know, there's typically long range provisions. The infrastructure has a life generally of between 60 and 70 years. So, you know, that is why when a municipality installs infrastructure, it should be built to anticipate the changing climate for the next 7 years during the life of it itself as an asset.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Tinsley?
My only comment was in the discussion here is just that this is excellent. It's something we need to get started on, and this is the first step to look at further assessments, and it's a very important thing for the community overall. As we go down this road, it's something that, as the CEO mentioned, has been around far too long, and it's discussed by people in the community, and it's not something we want to have going on much longer if possible.
Agreed. Thank you. Councillor Kushner?
Yeah, my apologies to the rest of council, but I have to pull a pin here. I'm feeling quite ill. And I'm very, very sorry.
No, well, thank you. Well, take care of yourself. Okay,
You bet.
thank you.
Take care, Norm.
Take care.
Okay, one thing, CAO, on discussion on this topic is they're also going to be looking at the culverts off Ambleside. Is that correct?
I'd have to look at the proposal. Of course, they'll look at anything we ask them to. But I imagine that they'll, you know, that culvert on Ambleside is part of the drainage system. So they'll be probably looking at the entire system that takes water from the top down to the bottom.
Excellent. Thank you. So opposed? Hearing none. Motion carried. Okay, so next is the Emergency Support Service Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Grant application. Did you want to speak on that a little bit, CAO?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Baker. This was completed by Sean Koopman on our behalf. So I'd like to extend a thanks to him for his good work on this on our behalf. Essentially, it is for council to pass the resolution to support application to the Strathcona, through the Strathcona to the Emergency Support Services Grant Program. Councillor Craig made reference to some of this earlier. This particular initiative is to contribute towards some articles that will be useful to us in the event of an emergency, which includes the tent, which is shown on the second page, the 4 units, 4 of them, which are 10 by 5, in case we have an emergency where people are outside and we need a warming tent or we need shelter of some type. And also 25-year shelf life water, so that if there's an interruption to our services, we can provide support to residents of the community and keep that water knowing it'll last for some time in one of our sea cans to provide for that in the eventual need of it. So 2 really useful items that will support us and hopefully we'll never use. They'll just sit there in the sea can, but that's what this application is for, is to get a council resolution, which generally needs to be provided within a month of the application, and the application deadline was the 28th. So we would forward that as part of the reporting when the funds have been expended, and the requirement is to do reporting.
Thank you. Sorry, I have a question. With the tents and the shelters in the water through the SRD, where are they going to be stored? Councillor Craig, do you have any information on that?
Yeah, actually I do. I'm just going to tell you they're going to be stored in CCAN along with all of our other emergency supplies. Now, just to expand a little bit on what our CAO said, the component for this was in two different streams, or 2 different avenues: the EOC component for emergency management and the ESS component for training and exercise to increase capacity, volunteer recruitment and retention, purchases of equipment for group lodging kits and whatnot. Now the tents actually, that was between Sean, Diane, Pat, and myself, and through our various phone calls through our MIECM boards. The water was not mine. I believe the water was either Pat's or Diane's. But these all came about through the various groups and committees that the EPC belonged to, the ESS and the EPC. So it's not just the Village of Sayward. These ideas are being implemented on most of the communities throughout the island, especially North Island, and you're going to find pretty much every community's got these same basic set of supplies. So it was really a very, very large community effort on these things. And yeah, they're going to be stored in the CCAN, as our CAO said, until there's an emergency.
Perfect. No, that's excellent work. So hats off to everybody involved in that. So the recommended resolution is, sorry, just lost it there, from the report from the CAO be received, and that the application for financial assistance under the Community Emergency Preparedness Fund Emergency Support Service Grant be authorized for submission to the UBCM in collaboration with the Strathcona Regional District, and that the Village of Sayward authorizes the SRD to receive and manage the funds on behalf of the Village of Sayward if the application is successful. So recommended resolution, I need a motion, please.
I so move.
Second,
I'll second it.
discussion? Opposed? I hear none. Motion carried. Urban Systems Review and Update of the Village Sayward Official Community Plan. CAO?
Thank you, Chair Baker. This staff report is to seek council approval to enter into a contract with Urban Systems to complete a review and update of the Village of Sayward Official Community Plan. Now, the way this project started is that there was a grant opportunity sometime in the early fall, and Urban Systems, as part of their business planning, like all consulting firms, offer to write proposals pro bono, because then the opportunity also lands in their lap to do the work. So this is what happened here. The proposal was to do an update of the community plan with a specific focus on age-friendly policies, and so that will be one of the key drivers of the plan, is to look at what the residents need in terms of aging. Not our infrastructure aging, but our people aging and what people need. we talk all the time about our aging infrastructure, but we also have people that have needs. So, and you know, in addition to other policy things around aging, you know, it'll also look at housing needs, because in addition to this, we were successful in getting a $15,000 housing grant to do a housing needs assessment, which is just perfectly aligned with the community plan, because housing and the planning, of course, go hand in hand. So, and then we've also applied for a $10,000 Fire Smart grant, which Councillor Craig was talking about earlier to some extent in the wildfire management to do Fire Smart planning. So there's a number of sources of funding for this project, all of which add up to the required 50,000. The downside of that, of course, is that we won't go out for a call for proposal from a wider group to seek proposals, because that would really be an unfair use of consultants' time, given that we've already kind of committed for the plan to be done by one. Also, you know, it's better for us to have one firm writing the policies and doing the plan for all of the things, including Fire Smart and safety, housing, and of course, age-friendly policies. So while generally we would be doing an RFP for this, in this case, we've cobbled together the 3 grants and would tack it on to the consultant that initiated the project in the first place. In terms of the work, it's expected to take probably around 9 months or so, 10 months. It's likely to be finished by the fall. And it follows the general process of most community plans, whereby there's some preliminary work done to find out what council's needs are and what council sees as priorities, identifying certain constraints, doing some visioning with council about what could be and what are the opportunities. Of course, we know Sayward is a very unique and beautiful seaside community on the shores of one of the most important estuaries in the province. And it has a history of industry. It has a fishing industry. It has tourism potential. It has a lot of things going for it. It's a beautiful little community with a wonderful future. So the plan is an opportunity for the community to get together and think about what it is they want to see, even though many of us won't be here in 30 or so years when this plan really lives its whole life. It's an opportunity for us to do something for future generations to make this community even nicer and more livable than it currently is. And actually, it can be a lot of fun to do while in the process itself, because people enjoy looking forward and looking at what could be. It's an opportunity for council to identify some of the constraints to development and seek ways to address those through infrastructure grants, extension of grants, possibly even municipal boundary expansions. Those are the kinds of things that come up in a plan review. There's also an opportunity for a survey for residents, and so, you know, we'll employ every creative method we can to get every household responding to that if possible. You know, we're small enough that that's something we can really put some work into so that everybody can feel heard. And there'll be some stakeholder workshops with key stakeholders such as Island Timberlands, Western Forest Products, the Comox First Nation, the BC Nature's Trust, the nursing station, the RCMP, Sayward Futures, the Ministry of Education and Health, School District, Transportation. Every one of those stakeholders will have specific interests that we'll want to look at. One thing about a community plan that's unique to other municipal documents and responsibilities and opportunities is that the plan can make advocacy policy statements. So we can talk about what we'd like to see other jurisdictions doing. For example, the electoral area right next door. We can make advocacy policies in the plan towards future development and opportunities to work together to achieve certain outcomes as well. So it's quite a broad opportunity and a fairly big process. The thing about a community plan is once it's completed, it's a fairly binding document and a bylaw on council, and all other bylaws have to be in compliance with the official community plan, and in particular the zoning bylaw. So the way that works is the plan kind of allows us all to think about what we'd like to see and put into place realistic designs for the future. And the zoning bylaw is amended gradually to march us towards that goal. So you'll have a property that's maybe designated for one thing now, and the property has those rights associated with that, the plan will allow you to think, well, you know, a better use for this area might be this. And then we gradually get there by incrementally zoning towards that. So that's the way those two work together. And the zoning bylaw can only be amended to comply with a community plan. So if an area is designated for a different use in the future, if the owner wants to change the use that's there now, they can only change to that use that's proposed unless the council is willing to change that use. And so you do see official community plan amendments from time to time. And they're a little longer, of course, because that means the whole picture has to be relooked at rather than tinkering around with pieces. You know, the idea is that this is the plan, here's where we're going, here's how long it's going to take to get there, here's the constraints, and then we gradually get there. And if there's changes of thought along the way, which is normal to some extent, you know, it begins to look a little different. So essentially that is the proposal. Urban Systems has provided us with a great overview of their strategy and their approach and their team. They propose to use two of their planners along with Dr. Pam Shaw from the Vancouver Island University Planning Master's Program and some of the planning students in that program. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to get quite a lot of planning expertise in the community and planning discussions with the community, hopefully real live ones, not virtual ones. Hopefully we'll get through this and get into some real, you know, big meetings in the gym where people can look at some designs and have some ideas about how land should be developed, how infrastructure should be developed. And that's the proposal that's laid out before you tonight.
Thank you. So the recommended resolution is that the proposal be reviewed and updated by the Village of Sayward officially community plan, received by Urban Systems on January 21st, 2001, received, and that the Village of Sayward entered into the contract with Urban Systems to complete and review the updated official community plan with the proposal submitted to the Village on January 21st, 2025 for the sum of $50,000. Do I have a motion, please?
I'll make
move
it.
that.
Second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Opposed?
through
I'm
to
sorry.
the
I'm sorry,
CAO.
Councilor.
Yes, I'd like to ask the CAO if this process is going to be over 8 to 10 months, is $50,000 enough to, is this the price that they've given for completing this OCP?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Paulson, yes, that is their proposed price, and that's a reasonable price for the, you know, for the size of this community and the nature of the issues. You know, they'll probably have other projects on the go at the same time, but they'll go through the process they've proposed and try to coordinate as many meetings as they can when they're in town so that they minimize on their travel costs.
Okay, thank you.
Opposed? Motion, I don't hear any, so motion carried. Bylaws? None. New business? None. Just an update on the mayor's report are some of the things that I've witnessed in the last little while here. Earlier, I had a teleconference again with Minister Josie Osborne, and she recommended that all of us go onto the BC CDC website for updates on COVID. You know, in case anybody in our village asks any questions, we'll be able to get the update information off from the CDC. Also, with the SRD, the KCFN First Nations will join the SRD April 1st, 21. So that's a huge thing because normally there has not been any First Nations group attached with the SRD. So this is, sorry, CAO, you have a question?
Sorry, Mayor Baker, I can wait. This is related to something you mentioned just a minute ago on the COVID update.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that in tonight's correspondence, we have included the update that we get on, frequent basis from the Public Service Island Health. And it was issued on January 15th with the public service announcement on the COVID update. So we would regularly include this and could include it on our website if you think that's useful.
I think that would be useful. Thank you. Council agree? Also with the SRD, the last mile is due to be completed by 2022. Now, there's a big push with TELUS, and there's been a lot of pressure put on the service providers to provide internet and to provide low-cost internet to seniors, which is something that TELUS is preparing to do. Because quite frankly, if they can improve the broadband across the communities in the North Island, all that's going to do is give us the opportunity to grow because people won't have to live in the city. They'll have access to high-speed internet and they'll be able to do their work from home, as like Tom is doing. He doesn't have to move to Vancouver or anything else. He can stay here and hopefully it'll attract more people. So that's all I have for committee reports. Question period. The purpose of the question period is to permit people by email or by submitting a letter to the town, to the village, to discuss questions that they have. The speaker will allowed to ask one question each if time permits. After the opportunity is asked, the question speaker allow the second question. For the record, we're going to state name. We have one question from one resident. Pardon me, there's an A and B to it. So it's addressed to Mayor and Council and CFO and CAO. Ladies and gentlemen, regarding the Committee of a Whole meeting on Tuesday, January 26, 2021 at 7 p.m. Please accept this formal notice as my strong objection to the Village Council hearing any submission or application for the subdivision of property at 18 Sarah Road. Well, there is an overdue outstanding property tax owing on the village from this property owner, that the property owner within the amount of property tax outstanding would be facing property tax sale. And that there's been no acknowledgement or attempt to remediate the damages done to the sensitive respiratory areas identified by the Minister of Environment, i.e. the diversion of bulldozing, shut and salmon bearing streams to avoid environmental correct need to provide under road culverts beneath the road and accessing owner's properties. I'm expecting the courtesy of these items to be read into the record, added to the agenda and publicly announced at the meeting for the advertisement of the Sayward public. I'm also expecting that the Mayor and Council address these issues with the developer who has been granted the courtesy of participating in the meetings, something which the public has not. So CAO, do you want to address any of these questions?
Thank you, Chair Baker. This letter was delivered as in response to the staff report and the application that was on the agenda a couple of weeks ago. And of course, Council made the decision to add these letters to under the public input at the end of the meeting, and that's what where we're at with this. With respect to this questions, there's a couple of corrections. First of all, any property with property tax owing would not be facing a property tax sale until taxes were in arrears after 3 years. So this, most property owners make sure that their taxes are paid because we have very few property tax sales. So, but some people use their own judgment and establish their own financial plans to pay their taxes incrementally, including penalties and interest charges, because that works for them. And so that's a completely logical response to their situation and provided for by VC Assessments, who sets the penalty, and by ourselves, who sets the interest charges. So it's not quite true that any property owner with that amount would be facing a property tax. So that's just a correction on the facts. Also, with respect to the second question, the owner, as I've mentioned, has now been informed about the requirement to do a riparian area protection assessment. I understand that the applicant has previously owned and operated his own road building equipment and worked primarily for the forestry companies. The forestry companies are exempt from the riparian area protection regulations, as are a number of ministries, like the Ministry of Transport. So in his capacity, he would not have known about the riparian area regulation. And so once he was informed, he has now since hired a qualified environmental professional and has carried out the assessment. So we haven't seen the report, nor has he, because it's, it takes some time for the biologist to prepare it. Now, I will say it is really difficult for a biologist to assess damage to or strategies around a riparian area after the work's been done, because it's impossible to see what it was like before that. So that's the situation we have. However, that isn't unfortunately unusual. People often do things without realizing that they have a process that they've missed. So, and it's difficult to, start in a perfect step when you've already started the process. However, going forward, I'm quite certain that the applicant, now fully informed of the requirements, will be meeting that standard, and so that's good. Now, on the issue of the courtesy, it's actually not a courtesy, it's a legal right that any landowner has under the Local Government Act to apply for rezoning. So he has the right to apply to have it rezoned, and council has the obligation legally to hear that and consider it in a fair way. And so, and of course, that's what council has been doing. Unfortunately, the public is not able to attend now, primarily due to the public health order given the COVID restrictions. And that's the sad reality that we all are living through in 2020 and 2021 so far. So those are the technical answers. Now, I do want to say that I did meet with this individual earlier on with some other residents. They had a number of concerns about a number of things, and then we set up the meeting. I met with the mayor and the applicant, these individuals, and in the course of that, in discussing the Adama project, which they had some concerns about, I had shared an earlier version of the staff report, which is why the individual were aware about the tax arrears. So, I had asked them to just look. We are looking at all these things. Look at this list. We're on this. Don't worry. We're going to get to it. And so I think from my further up and follow-up conversations with the applicant there, or Miss Edinger rather, she is reasonably satisfied with the answers. However, wanted the opportunity to be heard tonight and to have her opposition to this project recorded. And so that is her goal, and that's what council has heard tonight. So that's what I don't think there's anything else I can add to that, except to say that there are a number of individuals who choose to pay their taxes incrementally, and that's a system that works, and it's within the policy framework. So it certainly doesn't disallow the applicant from applying for zoning. The intent was to, because of the scope of his project, to ask him to demonstrate to council his financial strategy, and that's really what this is about. So I think we're reasonably happy with that so far.
Anybody have any comments? No?
Maybe I will, if that's okay, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Tinsley?
Just thank you, CAO, and for the responses to this. I think it's really important that we, in discussions about any project, is remind everyone, and the individual that wrote this letter as well, there's very numerous steps and processes through this. It's a long route. There will be opportunity for public representation. There will be public meetings. This is a long process, and it will be well defined, as it already is, as described by our CAO.
Thank you. Councillor Craig?
Yeah, I have a couple comments. The first one is under paragraph A there. There seems to be a blank spot where it says there is blank overdue outstanding property taxes. Is there supposed to be a number in that area?
May I address that, CAO?
Mm-hmm.
Councillor Craig, there was a number in there, but it was not accurate because the gentleman did come in and put money down on the taxes. So it was an incorrect number, and that conversation was had from the CAO with Lee Ettinger to have that removed.
All right, well, I would like to make a motion that we take this discussion in camera, as I do believe that this village has now violated the Freedom of Information and Privacy Protection Act, as well as the Privacy Protection Act, specifically under the FOIPPA, Section 21, Paragraph 3 RC, which is the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to harm significantly the competitive position or interfere significantly with the negotiation position of a third party, as well as subsection 3, result in undue financial loss or gain to any person or organization.
So Councillor Craig,
I'm
why
not-
don't you just take it into camera as you suggested. We'll go in camera and we can discuss that further.
To go in camera, you have to reference the charter. And so it'll be 90 paragraph G. Section 90 paragraph G is litigation or potential litigation affecting the municipality, as well as paragraph J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under section 21 of the FOIPPA.
Okay, so CAO, do you have any comment on this before we go to camera?
Thank
Or
you.
should we put it in camera?
We can, obviously go into camera on it, but again, I would itemize that there is no disclosure in the staff report of personal information, so I'm not sure what the reference is to. And also on the issue of legal representation, generally that refers to advice from your lawyer with respect to a particular matter, so I'm not sure that clause would apply, Councillor Craig, but certainly the other one you cited could be used.
Councillor Tinsley?
I guess I would take the opposite view on this. This is information that is available to any member of the public. Any public record on property taxes is available. This is not information that is hidden away from public access. If anything, the property ownership issues and taxation payment issues are being expanded and made much more available to the public for access. So I'm not sure that this aspect is even warranted.
I have to agree with Councillor Tinsley because, as I said, anybody can walk into the office. They don't need a Freedom of Information request to see outstanding taxes or who pays what in taxes. That's all public information. Councillor Polson? Oh, sorry. Sorry, CFO?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to reference the section in the community charter that does talk about that. It's section 238, subsection 1, 2, and 3 talks about persons requesting a copy of a tax notice or a copy of a statement, which is under section 248, a statement of outstanding taxes. So I just wanted to reference that section for everybody if they wanted to refer to that at some point. And the other comment I wanted to make was there is a motion on the table. So Councillor Craig has made a motion to move in camera. You would need a seconder and all of council in favor of that to move to in camera. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO, do you have anything to add? Or we'll go through that on discussion.
Thank you. I was going to, what she said. No, I was going to point out what Lisa said about the, when you're ready, when you're finished, you would require a motion. I also wanted to add that the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act is a balancing act. It balances public access against private protection of private information. So it's, there's a reasonable expectation for privacy, and that's protected. However, and that's why there's no reason for us to disclose that in the staff report. What we want is financial strategy for the project. So there's no disclosure here. However, that doesn't preclude our obligation to provide public access to the information if any citizen wanted to see. So it is a balance of privacy and access, and it's always difficult, and it's a judgment call in some cases as to, is there a good reason for us to disclose this? And, to, as Councillor Craig has implied, it potentially intrude on somebody's privacy, and we've deliberately not done that here. However, As I say, I did meet with the individual and showed her an early version of my staff report, and so that's why she was concerned. Although when I explained to her that balancing act of privacy and access, she seemed to be comfortable with the answer, however, wanted her letter to stand so that council was aware of her opposition.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second for Wes's motion?
I second it.
Opposed? I'm opposed. Councillor Tinsley's opposed. It's 2-2. I'm sorry, CAO, what is the ruling on that?
It's defeated if it's equal.
Thank you. The motion is defeated. There is no in camera. Sorry, Councillor Paulson.
I have a comment about the letter. I would like to make a motion that we, as council, get together and establish some rules around what is presented to be read out to the public. And as far as I can see, there is no question in this letter. It states that it's a formal notice of her strong objection. And then she goes on to name what she's objecting about. Can you tell me where the questions are? And I think that we need to develop some guidelines for what is suggested or what is presented before council to be read out loud. So that's my motion, is to produce guidelines for the any questions that are presented from the public to the regular meetings.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion? I think for me, I think you got to keep in mind, if it was an open question period, that anybody from the public is allowed to stand up and either make a statement or ask a question. So, and it's our duty as council to make sure that these individuals are heard and they have that opportunity to ask that question. So I disagree with it. I think there's no harsh language. I mean, that we have to be careful of reading. It doesn't matter who it's through, as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, CAO, you have a comment?
Thank you. I was going to say that in response to Councillor Paulson's suggestion that we would want to do some research, we do have a procedures bylaw, and there are obligations to provide for public input. The province has released best practices guidelines on procedures in council, and so there's some good examples out there as to how to manage these things. I'd be hesitant to have guidelines separate and apart from the procedures bylaw.
Thank you. Councillor Craig, you have your hand up.
No, I just didn't lower it.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor. We did the discussion. So opposed? So the one, motion carried. So the motion is to have further discussion on guidelines for question period. Is that correct?
If I could amend that motion to do further research into the what should be put in at can be put in as accepted as questions to be talked about during the public question period.
Okay, thank you.
That we follow those guidelines in future.
Okay, CAO.
Thank you. I was going to suggest the following as a resolution, that staff be directed to conduct further research on provide guidelines to be included in a revised procedures bylaw.
Does that work for you, Councillor Paulson?
That works for me.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Tinsley? You had your
Works
hand
for
up?
me. That
Beautiful.
works for me.
Counselor Craig, you're good?
Just fine.
Okay, so motion carried.
Thank you, Ann. Or CAO.
Recommended resolution that the regular council meeting for February 4th, which is not the regular council meeting on 2/21, be adjourned. Do I have a motion?
I'll move that.
Second.
Second,
I'll second. Oh. I'll second.
sorry, discussion? CAO, you have your hand up?
No, I don't think, I didn't mean to. Sorry about that.
Oh,
No.
that's okay. Opposed? I hear none. Motion carried. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Take
All the
care.
best.
Thank you.
Stay safe. Take
See
care.
you on Tuesday.
Bye.